Hello, everyone. I see folks jumping in. To start things off, I'm launching a quick poll question for if you had to pick only one, what is your biggest challenge right now and how excited are you to attend this webinar today? So if you want to fill those out before we get into it, that would be great. Thank you all for joining. As a reminder, this is a roundtable of LGBTQIA plus employee resource group leaders, and we're going to be talking about building all things inclusive workplaces. So have a great panel for you all. If you want to hop into the poll, I see some answers being filled out right now. We'll give it one more minute as folks are joining too. If at any time you have questions for our panelists, feel free to use the chat or Q&A function, and we'll do our best to incorporate them into the conversation as well. I'm going to end the poll and get into it. These are the results. Awesome. For folks who don't know me, my name is Christina Giordano, she, her, and hers, and I'm the Senior Partnerships Manager here at AllVoices. AllVoices is an employee intelligence feedback platform to systemically ask for, accept, analyze all kinds of feedback, positive, negative, constructive, innovative, because we know you'll find great ideas and bad habits in real time, reducing turnover and recruiting costs. And we are really excited for today's webinar. We've had a lot of webinars in June, so excited to have our last one be really this roundtable discussion. I want to kind of jump to introductions. If you want to introduce yourself and include your pronouns, role, and why you're involved in your employee resource group, that would be great. Karel, if you want to kick us off, and I'll put the order in the chat here so we could just bounce around.
Yeah, absolutely, sure. And thank you again for having me. I'm excited to be here with all of you. So my name is Karel OC Alistair Julian, and he, they pronouns. My day-to-day role is I am the Director of Accessibility at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. And I am currently the co-chair of the LGBTQ employee resource group there. And I've been involved with the ERG because I got involved in 2017, was elected into office in 2018 as a chair. And I joined because I really wanted to make sure that we were bringing an intersectional lens to LGBTQ issues and staff engagement, and really looking to ensure that as the ERG supported the agency with building out LGBTQ, a culture of LGBTQ equity, that we really considered people of color, people with disabilities, lots of different intersections and identities.
Awesome. Hey everyone, my name is Amara, pronouns she, her. Currently I work as revenue operations and as a senior analyst at Full Story, revenue operations, and pretty much, just problem solver. And I am involved with our ERG because I founded it. We call ourselves the Queer Storians. So that's internally we refer to ourselves as Full Storians. So we are the Queer Storians. So it's for LGBTQIA plus people. So we are open to allies as well. And I started at Full Story during the pandemic, in 2020, the not very fun part of the pandemic, the baking part of the pandemic, I call it. And I founded it because I wanted to essentially build community and get to know more people. I felt rather isolated and thought to myself, probably as we're hiring a lot of people are starting remote and are feeling the same way. So it was a good way to interact, and it's kind of grown from there.
Hi, everybody. My name is Elisa Valdez de Ramirez, pronouns she, her, ella, based in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I am currently an engineering manager at Strava. I am currently involved in a couple ERGs at Strava, most notably and applicable to this panel, the Pride ERG at Strava, and been involved in several others and other, engineering orgs that I've been a part of. But the one at Strava, I'd have to say, is very special in that we do a lot for the community. First of all, there's a lot of us inside of that ERG, which is a change for me. one of the big reasons why I wanted to get involved just in general is because of that fact. I know that there are a lot of people in the LGBTQ community in tech. However, it's not always a super safe space in order to be openly out. And so, really excited to maybe make folks feel safer about being out in tech. So that's my big goal.
I'm happy to go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Paul Sabas, he, him, and I work in the sales organization for Southern Europe at Snapchat. I decided to jump onto the ERG ship, so I co-lead the Snap Pride, as we call it internally, since about a year and a half. So I joined automatically when I arrived at Snap. One of the main reasons I joined was I was previously working for Meta, and I was involved on the outside, so I was coming to different events. I really enjoyed that. It made me feel safe and empowered, and I wanted to take it further when I joined Snap and be in charge. I think my first objective was to take it from just building for the community within Snap and going further than that with educating and empowering the allies that are among us, and also empowering Snapchatters. So these are the two missions that were added under our arrival with my colleague Allison, and I think we've been pretty successful. So extremely happy to be here with you all.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alana Knapp. My pronouns are she, her, and my day job is I'm a senior property protection engineer for International Paper. I'm also the co-chair of International Paper's LGBTQ+ and Allies Employee Resource Group. We call it iPride. The reason I got involved with iPride is I moved to Memphis, which is where we're located, from Chicago back in 2017. And I came here with a lot of intention to actively get involved in supporting the LGBTQ community here in Memphis. And so I met somebody at International Paper when I first started who invited me to ask the company to support us in the Pride Parade. We had never been in the Pride Parade here in Memphis as a company before, and the company said yes. And so we marched for the first year in 2018. And since then, I've taken on a leadership role, and we've been going strong since then.
Incredible. Thank you all for being here, for sharing a little bit about your day jobs, and also why you raised your hand to be an employee resource group leader and be involved in ERGs as well. We know that there are a ton of goals and North Stars that you can tackle for ERGs. A couple of them were mentioned in terms of building that sense of belonging, community internally, and also engaging in the location that you're at as well, both externally, working with partners. I want to kind of ask, what is your goal, mission statement, or charter for your ERG? Paul, I'll pass to you first, but anyone can jump in and answer.
I think I kind of skipped that, or I kind of said a bit much already. So our mission here at Snap Pride is first to make sure that anybody who identifies as LGBTQ+ within the organization feels like they can show up as their authentic selves. So that goes through like drinks, dinners, but also what we call councils, like reflective session, where we all talk about our experiences. And it's probably the only time where engineers get to speak with legal, with sales, with marketing. Then our second mission is to educate and empower allies. I think it's capital, and we have that privilege at Snap to have a very, very open culture. So how do we speak to our allies? And so we've held a couple of sessions around bisexuality. We've invited parents of LGBTQ folks to hear about their experience as the ones who support us. And finally, it's to empower Snapchatters. So that's working with like NGOs to make sure that the platform is safe, that we have trust and safety in place, but also that we create even ground experiences in augmented reality that can help any person under the umbrella feel seen, and not just necessarily the dominating mainstream individual from the community.
I'll I'm sorry. I was going to say I'll jump in next if that's okay. So we just actually recently formalized this the Strava Pride group, and we have kind of a threefold mission as well, pretty similar to what Paul mentioned they have at Snap. So the first is like to set up support systems and safe spaces for people inside of the community. Our ERG does have like a closed group, and so folks who maybe don't want to be completely out, but want to get involved and access that support system and safe space can do so, anonymously. I think that's really important. When we have in-person events, we also do those invites as like private invites, again, not to like out anybody inadvertently. So that's really our first part of the charter. The second part is because we are a connected sports and fitness platform, has to do specifically with our product. And so we really want to make the product accessible for athletes, of all walks of life, and try to be as diverse as possible. And so some of that comes with education to folks inside of the organization, maybe working in product engineering or even leadership, so that they understand sport through the lens of LGBTQ people and what that looks like. And you can imagine that's a pretty like stark change from a lot of things, because some of our marquee sports are cycling and running, and those are typically gendered sports. And so making the changes inside of the product to reflect being inclusive to the LGBTQ community is really important to us. And then the third really ties in line with one of Strava's key values, which is working towards being an anti-racist community inside of Strava. So that's something that really is painted throughout the entire organization. But I think in this case, it's really important, like Karel was saying, that we talk about intersectionality inside of the LGBTQ community and what that looks like for folks of color, or maybe any other intersectionalities as well. And so we really want to foster that kind of relationship with the other ERGs inside of Strava. So those are our three, big charters for us here.
Yep, and I'll go next. I had a big hand in drafting the charter for the LGBTQ employee resource group at the NYC Department of Health. And actually, while I'm at it, I just want to offer that anything said here by me may not necessarily be the views of the agency, but I just want to make sure I put that out there for everyone. But we took a lot of time to ensure that our charter was something that was reflective of everyone that was on the board, but then we farmed it out to our listserv and asked for input on it. And so we have our vision, we have a mission and a purpose, and I want to offer the purpose in particular, because I think that it was the one that we spent the most time on, making sure that we saw ourselves in it and were able to get behind it. And so the LGBTQ plus ERG's purpose is to support the liberation and well-being of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people in New York City and beyond, and foster an environment of inclusion, unity, and empowerment in the workplace. The ERG will accomplish its mission, which the mission is to foster community advocacy and institutional change within DOHMH. Will accomplish its mission by supporting member development, fostering a sense of community, engagement, and an inclusive environment, and by contributing to DOHMH's diversity and EEO goals regarding workforce, workplace, and community. And so, as I mentioned, these were all really, really important to us to ensure that we felt seen as we were doing what some might consider like the agency's work around diversity, what the agency's work around EEO policy, inclusion and equity are. The ERGs came to be around a time when the agency had kind of pivoted programmatically toward ensuring that we had a lens of anti-racism and social justice embedded in our work. And so, yeah, I share the vision, mission, and purpose, the mission and purpose in particular for that, just to kind of offer up just our thoughts on how it was that we were able to best get this work done.
Yeah, I love that. I also appreciate how in each of your answers, you're really specific around programming. Paul, when you talked about the event around bisexuality and inviting parents into the conversation. Elisa, when you were talking about kind of the impact you can have as a platform as well, and just giving and receiving that feedback to and understanding kind of the structural lens of it. And Karel, with your charter too, just really detailing the impact you can have in New York City and beyond, and who the employee resource group is really for, and creating those safe and brave spaces. For the kind of second piece of our discussion, and in the title of the webinar, we want to talk about that sphere of influence and inclusivity that that you all have at your organization. For folks who are listening, can you give an example of how your employee resource group has really influenced the culture of your company to be inclusive? What does this really look like? This could be anything. Alana, I'll pass to you first.
Great, thanks. That's a great question. So like I said, we first marched in the Pride Parade in 2018, but we didn't actually become an official employee resource group until 2020, which was right during the pandemic. And so we're still kind of getting started with increasing just the visibility for the LGBTQ community here at International Paper. So that's one thing that our group's really doing to kind of lay the groundwork for improving the inclusivity in general. And but launching during the pandemic actually kind of helped us a little bit, because we're headquartered here in Memphis, but we have a lot of facilities all over the world. And so by kind of being forced to do things virtually, that naturally led to it being a more inclusive group, because now not only could people in Memphis participate on some of our programming, but people at all of our facilities were participating too. And some of our programs that we did were educational around things like pronouns and LGBTQ terminology. And we talk a lot about allyship as well. And our ERG also has really become a sounding board for a lot of our facilities have their own diversity and inclusion management groups. And so we're a sounding board for all of those different diversity and inclusion groups globally when they have questions or want to learn more about LGBTQ issues. And so that's really helping with inclusion as well.
I'll go ahead and hop in next. So just to kind of expand a little bit about what I mentioned regarding, how we integrate LGBTQ inclusion into our application or into our product. We've had sessions with non-binary athletes talking specifically about their experiences in their athletic endeavors and athletic journeys. And, the result of some of those sessions was very key changes, some of them athlete facing and some of them internal. So, specifically changes to how we handle gender inside of the code base, not just for the athlete, right? So that folks that are working on the code base are getting the same experience that an athlete would. So really important for, I think, the mental health of everybody in the company to have that experience where gender isn't binary, even in the code. So I thought that was a really phenomenal thing. Something that I really loved about Strava when I started was every time we introduce ourselves, we give our pronouns. I think that's really important. It's everywhere, including email signatures, Slack signatures, and then of course on Zoom and whenever we're having interactions with one another. So that already feels like much more inclusive. One of the anecdotes I like to talk about is the very first interview I had during the process of getting hired at Strava was with my now manager. And he jumped on screen, it was a Zoom call, and he was wearing a Strava Pride shirt, and it had the full Pride spectrum intersectionality flag on it. And I mean, I didn't know if he was part of the community, but just seeing him wearing that shirt made me instantly feel safe. And then soon after, later on, we have an amazing person on our recruiting and people team who had posted something on LinkedIn about, being non-binary, trans femme. And that I was just like, okay, great. I'm in a safe space. So we're signaling outwardly, not just inwardly, to ensure that folks in the community feel like this is going to be the safe space that it actually is. And I think that's really important to ensure that we are making folks feel included walking in the door.
And I'll go. The employee resource group at DOH, the LGBTQ plus employee resource group, was actually, as I mentioned a little earlier, we had been forming right around that same time as a lot of the anti-racist, social justice work at the agency had started. And so the LGBTQ ERG actually was really the progenitor of the agency's presence in the New York City Pride Parade, right? And we've been in the Pride Parade ever since, barring the one 2020 and 2021 because of COVID. But we recently were in it again this year. And it's always been this big event leading up to June where we've hosted, webinars, we've brought people in to speak. We've also created opportunities for staff to, we have a really large float here in New York City. And so staff get to like sign up to dance at it, to pack some of the bags of things that we're going to be, giving away to folks on the route. But I mean, that aside, we've also done outside of Pride and celebrating Pride, we've also done a lot of work structurally within the agency. This is government, right? So it's always this, and the New York City government at that, which is like 300,000-400,000 people all by itself. So it's this really large entity. But one of the things, some of the things that we've been able to accomplish were having the agency and advocating for the agency to have all gender restrooms installed on multiple floors throughout. There's about 23 there. We've also, the health department is also responsible for birth and death certificates. And so we were one of the first agencies to allow for the X I think it's the sex signed at birth column on birth certificates, so parents to be able to put X. To give their children a chance to identify themselves when they got older, right? And I mean, and there are many other things. We've had trans for Trans Day of Remembrance and other holidays, which we've we've gotten the agency to really celebrate with us, right? We have hosted job fairs and things along those lines to ensure that staff and also potential staff really understand our stance. One other thing, if I can, I know I'm kind of rambling and going on, but during the COVID operation, we were responsible for vaccination of all New York City people, right? And one of the jobs that myself and a number of other folks were working toward during that, as I served as the equity officer, was ensuring that all staff at the vaccination sites here in New York City had, pronoun pins, were trained on LGBTQ and gender awareness, were, really, really supported with better understanding how to support themselves in these 12-hour shifts, as well as, clients, patients that were coming in to get vaccinated. So we've done a lot of work, and it's really been an important aspect of the agency's experience in the last 7 years or so.
I think those are all really great examples. Elisa, I think you use the term of like internal and outward signaling too, to show that you can have an impact internally on your employees when you're making introductions, email signatures, using pronouns, and also training folks. Karel, as you were talking about working with folks in the community to make sure that they kind of understand or navigating these conversations, they have pins, and also kind of ways you can get involved as well. For folks who are listening and they're like, I want to start an employee resource group specifically at my organization. Amara and Alana, can you kind of shed some light on how you started your employee resource groups? Amara with Queer Storians, I know you mentioned that sense of belonging, but at a high level, what did that process look like? And I know we had a question come in about if you can share if your HR department was involved or what kind of support they offer too.
Of course. So I could just break this down into 3 points. First, I think it's important to see if there's interest, right? You want to make sure that it's something that would add to company culture and that, would have members. So the first thing I did was talk to some of my coworkers and some of the people on my team, on other teams, and just see, is this something that you would be interested in? The time I joined Full Story, I think I'm all-time employee number 300 and something, and the company had about 200 and less than 250 people when I joined. So it was very startup, getting to scale up mode. So that's the first thing, and there was interest. So it's like, okay, great, people are interested in this. The second thing would be to figure out name/designation, right? And coming up with a name, I enjoy naming things. So I was like, all right, spend a lot of time coming up with Queer Storians. So I was like, I don't know, full queer, it just sounds like very on the nose. But more in terms of designation of what is this group / who is this group for, right? And I did a lot of thinking about this. Do we want this to be a closed group for just members of the community? Do we want this to be an open group that is open to allies and to anyone. And essentially, I decided that it would be an open group. The reason for that, two reasons. One thing that I think is really amazing about the LGBTQIA plus community, the A, does stand for asexual, but also allies at time. And I think that some of the power in terms of political power of the group and its success has come from the fact that allies have been included, right? And the second thing I was very cautious of is, kind of what Elisa spoke about. You don't want to out anyone. You want it to be welcoming and for people to be able to participate. And I just thought making the group open would ensure that we meet everyone wherever they are in their journey, whether you are fully out, whether you are questioning, whether you are not really sure and you're just curious, or you're a staunch ally and supporter and have been your entire life, right? So that's why Queerstorians is one of the open groups at Full Story. And then the third thing is, a little bit what someone brought up in the chat, right? So there's the HR component, and kind of, I assume for bigger organizations, Alana's probably going to speak about that, like advocating for leadership to support their creation. When I started at Full Story, I think there was only one ERG, and that was for women, full femmes. So it's kind of the second ERG, and kind of it started our DEI initiative, right? In a lot of ways, or rather streamlined and developed it. So I'm very lucky and very happy to say we got a lot of support from HR. They were like, we love the name, you're good to go. And in the group, we have a lot of senior leadership. And I guess number 4, that's what we're kind of working on right now. We just hired a head of DEI and hired a DEI program manager here at Full Story. So now we're in the process of really formalizing, how do we define ERGs? What does that mean? How do we have chairs? Who's the leader? And is there going to be compensation? All these additional questions are coming along, but you have to start the ERGs first, right? So about 2 months ago, the Asian and Pacific Islander ERG started at Full Story. And a couple months later, Black Storian started, the African diaspora and Black African-American ERG. So yeah, I guess it's the first step. And now we're at step 4, which is how do you formalize this? And yeah.
Yeah, so thanks, Amara. I'll talk a little bit about what it was like for such a huge international company like International Paper. I think at the time we had probably around 50,000 employees, so we're quite a big company. But it was kind of similar steps as Amara. You really have to make sure that there's interest first in starting up some kind of group like this. And so, I think as a queer person, I had a lot of experience from where I'd worked before and where I'd lived before, and just networking with the queer community in general, kind of find each other. So when I started here, I started to build a community of queer friends and just learning about what they had tried to do at International Paper in the past, and they maybe weren't successful, but they had made progress moving forward. And it might have also just been the right time and place, but when my friend and I went and requested IP to support us in the Memphis Pride Parade in 2018, it was the time for IP to step up and do that. And so we worked through the community engagement group at our company, and through our diversity, we had a diversity and inclusion group at that time too. And so part of our process was actually to write a proposal for how we thought, what we thought the need was, and how we saw our group giving back to our company and to the LGBT community. And we took that proposal and we presented it to the Global Diversity and Inclusion Council here at International Paper, which is a council of probably 10 to 15 senior leaders and senior VPs of the company that were already, focusing in and talking about diversity and inclusion at International Paper. So we presented our proposal. At the time, there were only 2 employee resource groups here at IP. And so we were accepted as a group, and we became the 3rd. And like I said, we're mostly a Memphis-based group, but I think soon after that, the pandemic happened, and we went all virtual. And so now we're really a group of people from across the globe at all of our facilities to participate. And our group, so we became official in 2020, and we are now kind of starting to write a charter for ourselves, but we also have a very strong diversity and inclusion group at International Paper as a company. And so they're helping us to do a lot of the stuff that we were trying to do ourselves from the beginning. We were taking it on ourselves. We were very grassroots and trying to organize as if we would organize like a nonprofit out in the community. But it's been very helpful here to have the support of HR, of the D&I team to help us with all of the supporting materials that help our group run.
Yeah, it definitely takes a village, and also that grassroots effort as well. You mentioned the HR team. I know there are questions around senior leadership and executive sponsors as well. And of course, all of what we're talking about to really move the needle at your organization, make sure your employer is inclusive, takes time, money, and resources. And the leaders at your company really need to invest in that. And I think in all of our kind of webinars with employee resource group leaders, this question always comes up: how are you really recognized, celebrated, and importantly compensated as ERG leaders? Paul, I know we were talking about how it's related to performance review cycles and just the role that it has at Snap. Do you want to kind of share a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And before even saying that, I think it's very just inspiring to hear stories from other industries, because I generally meet with ERG in tech. So like, I think it's very humbling to hear the stories from outside of tech, because sometimes we're in our bubble and we just think, wow, like this is going so fast, and we're going really into the depth of it. So I think we're very lucky in EMEA, at least, well, everywhere, but in EMEA, our executive sponsors really care about the diverse, like having a diverse workforce. But obviously, like, diversity is just the beginning. Like, inclusion is where we're trying to get at. And so what we have in terms of process is that we have a meeting with executive sponsors. So each director, it's director or VP, every ERG has to have a director or VP as an executive sponsor. So there are 8 ERGs, and we meet with them on a 6-week basis. So we'll be telling them what we do so they can better acknowledge what we do. We can ask them to run the communications about the event. So all of the communications about our event will directly come from the leadership and various like different leaders across the organization, sometimes women, sometimes Black individuals, sometimes white men. And I think that's really also important, because we often identify with leaders that look like us. So yes, that space really helps us to be compensated, because they have absolute visibility on all the work that we do on top of our day jobs. I think that's key to sort of leading an ERG long term, because if no one recognizes what you do, as much passion as you have, like you might just get frustrated, because you also have to do your day job on the side. And then what's incredible at Snap, when you do your review, so every 6 months you have a review that you self-write and other people are going to write about you. One of the questions that probably accounts for like more than 20% is, what have you done to make the company more inclusive? And then this helps everyone in the company to think, if I don't have anything to say here, it means I need to think about it. And if I do, that's incredible. And to a certain extent, that's what's going to differentiate you from your neighbor. If you're doing exactly the same performance, but you're making sure that you're building an inclusive culture, that is going to make a difference also in terms of your promotion, and which is key, because these are things that we don't see in terms of product level. It's hard to measure, but at least it's in that review. So I think, that's always a good suggestion to any leadership to say, like, to add this question and to see how many people answer it and who answers it with what, to answer your question. And I'll leave the floor, because there's so much we can talk about, but I feel like that question and having executive meetings where they recognize what you do are probably a very good start.
I'll jump in on this one too. So our co-chairs of all of our employee resource groups. We have 4 employee resource groups now. We all were awarded recently with strategic driver awards at one of the Diversity and Inclusion Council meetings. And so we were surprised about that. I didn't know that that was coming, and that really made me feel like my company sees me and is recognizing what I'm bringing to the company and how I'm supporting not just the LGBTQ community here at IP, but also the company in general. We also have the opportunity to make our own list of goals of what we want to accomplish every year. And so even before I was leading up this employee resource group, I always had a goal on my list of adding to the D&I and improving inclusion for the company. And so being the co-chair of this group really is allowing me to personally reach some of those goals of, you know, improving my leadership skills and getting to know a lot more people at all different levels within the company. And we don't get monetarily compensated for what we're doing as leading up the employee resource groups, although we're always open to that. But we get included in getting to participate in D&I events in our communities. And we're also, again, just the visibility of getting to know different levels of the company, I think can really help our careers.
Love visibility, compensation, celebration, and really that investment as well, because everybody is doing really incredible work at the end of the day, it does benefit the organization, for your employer brand, for current employees, potential employees, customers. It's really like a win-win for everyone as well. We've talked about a little bit in our conversation, intersectionality, the presence of other employee resource groups and working together, meeting and collaborating for events, for common goals. We know that no group is a monolith, and it's really important to think intentionally about the conversations and programs you're having. How do you work with other employee resource groups at your organization? And also, I think this relates to kind of one of the audience questions we have here around, given the kind of multiple components of identity around LGBTQIA plus folks, how do you really think about ensuring that employers are recognizing each component under that umbrella? So I'll open that up to Lisa, if you want to go first.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned a little bit when we talked about the charter that one of Strava's values is our anti-racism commitment. In fact, it's our first and probably most highest held value. So I think we're kind of fortunate in that, you know, we look at everything from that lens kind of to start, right? We have a framework that is constantly evolving and that we're working on together as a team, understanding that this commitment is a journey and not a destination. And the work that we're doing needs to be real and not performative. And so, you know, really understanding what systemic racism is and seeking to dismantle it as much as we can inside of the systems in which we have control over, right? So I think that's a big advantage for us. I've definitely worked with other LGBTQ ERGs that maybe didn't have that lens wrapping around the entire company, and you know, intersectionality was always a challenge. You know, particularly in tech spaces, if you are part of an underrepresented group in a tech space, just one group, that already, you know, is kind of an anomaly in some tech spaces, right? Depending on the size of the company. But to be part of multiples also makes it more complicated. So something that I think we do really well here at Strava, just in general, is seeking everything around diversity. So we're really lucky in that our ERG is super diverse and that people have multiple intersectionalities and are part of some of our ERGs, our AAPI, our Latinx and Black group, our Women in Tech group, right? So we have several other groups, and I think we're really lucky in that we have multiple voices. That just kind of happened, I think, as a result of having that anti-racism commitment be at the forefront. And so, you know, nothing needs to be super intentional in terms of linking things together, because we have representatives from all those groups kind of woven throughout the ERG.
Amar, if you want to go, yeah.
Oh, you can go, Carol. I'll go after you.
Um, so, I mean, the health department has 5 ERGs: the LGBTQ plus ERG, Achieve, which is the African American and Black ERG, Salud, which is the Hispanic ERG, the South Asian ERG, and the AAPI ERG. And then we have a couple of affinity groups like the social worker affinity group and some other groups. And so, I mean, some of the ways that we ensure that we work with the other ERGs, one of the first things that I did, and the reason why I joined the LGBTQ ERG, there was an opportunity to join Achieve as a co-chair, and I thought about the importance of ensuring intersectionality in LGBTQ conversations, and also the importance of pushing LGBTQ conversations in other communities, right? And so with that in mind, I felt that the most impact that I could have as a leader in an ERG was in the LGBTQ one as a Black gay man, right? And so some of the conversations, I remember there were a lot of like really deep conversations with some of the other ERG leadership because, especially around things like Pride, or a good example would be around in Black History Month, really pushing Achieve to, on their own, acknowledge the contributions to civil rights and Black history of Black queer folks, right? Making sure that during some of our, during other months, for example, in between, from September 15th to October 15th or so, there's an overlap for Hispanic, I think it's Hispanic Heritage Month, and then also, or is it Women's Heritage Month? One of the two. But then, there are just other opportunities throughout the year where LGBTQ issues and conversations, celebrations and opportunities to interact with other ERGs really happen. And especially during Pride, we try to make sure that we bring all the ERGs together and say, how can we celebrate Pride in each community? From hosting different sessions for what are they called? Viewing sessions for movies that we might list and things like that. To, downright to ensuring that like when they send out a blast to their listserv, we send it to ours. When we send out a blast to our listserv, we send it to theirs. We meet monthly to talk about all of the issues going on at the health department, and really look to make sure that we are a collective of people managing and running our ERGs in, toward different ends, but also toward the same end, and that has really been very supportive, I would say, to ensuring and managing intersectionality at the agency. It's a huge agency, so it's important that everybody gets an opportunity or has an opportunity to be seen.
Awesome. Just building off what Carl has said, in kind of your decision between joining Achieve or joining the LGBT ERG, I think on a very basic level, right? No group is a monolith, but the same way, like no person is really a monolith. We all are part of different intersecting identities. And it's the same for the people that are working as leads and co-chairs within ERGs, right? So I think, at least at Full Story and in my experience, collaboration comes second nature because it's a lot of the same people, your colleagues, you speak and that type of stuff. In more practical terms, the way I like to think of intersectionality, and I think that as a leader, it's an additional challenge call to action. I think of it as we're already shining a light on one group. How do we shine an even bigger light on maybe an intersection, right? A subset of that group, and you be able to celebrate them. So for example, during Black History Month this year, we held a full circle discussion on intersectionality. So Full Circle is a time where we come together at Full Story. It's open to the entire company, and we review an article, a podcast, a movie, or a video for discussion and for people to, sometimes they're a bit more academic, sometimes it's something has happened in the news and people just want to share how they're feeling. So this one was during Black History Month, and we specifically spoke about the intersectionality of the LGBTQIA and African-American Black identity. And it focused on the legacy of Andre Leon Talley, the editor at Vogue, and his experiences, his story, his legacy, celebrating him and his challenges, of course. So I find this particularly important because your life is not really single-threaded. And I think when you focus on intersectionality, people are able to relate even more, because you're living as a Black person, but you're also living as a Black queer person. So it's even more relevant to your members. And then on a more broad scale, when I think of company collaboration, I think of it's really important as ERG leaders to kind of know the communication channels and the heads of communications at your company. Specifically, I'm thinking about at Full Story, we have this thing called AllVoices. It's a monthly conversation where two people speak for 30 minutes each and just share about their life or anything that's passionate. People have spoken about veganism. People have spoken about riding motorcycles, just something about you. And this year we had our second Pride edition of AllVoices, which was really awesome. And also during Pride Month, during Black History Month, and during Asian and Pacific Islander Month, we kind of took over the newsletter and used the weekly newsletter as a way to educate people and disseminate information. So you're not just speaking to the people in the ERG, you're going a step further and collaborating with the rest of the company. So I know this was a question that came up in the Q&A call-in. How can you, someone in HR, someone in the company, help out with different ERGs? I think it's reaching out, and you control something, you're in charge of something at your company. How can you use that to shine a light on what other people are doing? For example, a year ago, the heads of content marketing came to me and they said, Amara, you started this ERG, we would love for you to write a blog post. So I wrote a blog post about how to start an ERG, my experience, and what we're doing at Full Story. 2 people read that, decided to join Full Story as employees, and now they are part of the Rainbow Council, which is what we call our chair group. So I think it's all of these things have a domino effect. It's kind of starting, but then also if you just want to shine a light, you will often achieve something that can really help out.
I love that. I think it's so important. None of us exist in one dimension. We're multidimensional people, stories, and an opportunity to facilitate those meaningful connections is these spaces, I think is really special. Time is literally running away from us. So we're going to answer some audience questions and then have our final question around a call to action, which is what we end all of our webinars around. So anyone can jump in. If we can have at least one person answer, that would be great. One of them is, how do you balance having initiatives led by LGBTQIA+ folks without creating cultural taxation / identity labor for LGBTQIA+ employees? So talking about good old emotional labor here, how do we think about it? Anyone can jump in.
I mean, I think here, one thing that I started out is just saying people will have to want to do this, and it has to be like a passion for you. So when I started getting, queer historians a little bit more formalized, I reached out and said, who would like to help me do this? Because it is not sustainable for me to do this alone, right? That's how you get founder burnout and all of that type of stuff. But on a more serious level, I think this is why, at least something we're working on at Full Story, and I know it's becoming more popular in tech, this should be part of your employee reviews, right? Paul just shared with us how it works into his, compensation, how it works into his reviews. This is real work that should be looked at the way the rest of your work is looked at, right? Your regular job and your job description. So I think it just is more of an impetus to push for looking at the ERG, the contributions of it, analyzing it, getting your metrics, and then advocating for this is an addition to what I'm doing, but also it's being driven by passion. So it's one of those balancing acts, right?
Absolutely. And I think that is the blog that you're referencing to, where you're talking about building queer historians too. So for folks who are interested in reviewing as well, I think it is a great read. The other question that we have come up is, We have some global organizations represented for companies with employees in offices across time zones and countries. How do you facilitate engagement? Do you do all meetings / programs virtually, or do you have local ERG quote chapters?
I'm happy to, I don't know if I'm happy to take that one. So obviously Snap is, a US company. I think in every US company, a lot of times there are US policies and US very centric values. So we have Snap US, we have Snap Pride New York, Snap Pride LA, Snap Pride EMEA, Snap Pride APAC. So we have very different chapters. This was really important for us. So when I started, it was Snap Pride London, and I made it Snap Pride EMEA. I'm French, and then my family lives in Italy. So I just wanted all of EMEA to feel represented, because there are very different issues in the UK to France to Italy, and it's important to get those. I think get this right. So we work very collaboratively with all the different Pride ERGs. So for example, speaker events, we'll gather everyone, because we want to be able to tell the leadership and that we have 400 attendees coming into understanding bisexuality, because that's very powerful, and we don't need as much nuance. We'll be able to cover that within the conversation a little bit, but we'll try and make it sort of like a generalized experience. So yeah, short, I would say we have a very strong collective power with ERGs from different locations, and we meet maybe every 6 weeks together to decide on the planning that's global, and then everybody has their local planning. We do ensure that there's no clash between all ERGs, so Snap Pride, Snap Women, Snap Noir, Snap Ability, and we have a calendar so everyone can sort of just put in their space, and ERGs can support each other. But the local remains very important. Probably that's where we get the most allies as well, because allies are already far away from our experiences. If you bring a German ally to a US LGBTQ plus held event, they sometimes feel quite that there's a very big distance, and it's harder to bring in allyship. So local events, smaller, more I would say focused on local content, including allies, and then globals for everyone, and anything that's an energizer and that's a very global issue or global conversation.
Next question is, how do you balance an open forum with creating a safe space, which I think is related, Paul, to what you were talking about? What if being an open forum is a deterrent for those who need it the most?
I mean, this is a conversation that we're currently having at Full Story, right? Because we have Costorians, it's kind of open, but that was when the company was 200, 300 people. Now we've grown a lot for almost 700 people, right? It's a little bit different, and we're going to keep growing. So essentially, I think that this is one where maybe you're not going to love this answer, but you have to be a little bit creative and see what your organization needs. And kind of, what Paul is talking about, there's no reason why there cannot be offshoots, right? If you, for example, at your company want to have a specific lesbians group, that's totally fine. There's ERGs, and then there are affinity groups. And I think that's how you have what I like to call a mosaic-like, lattice-like dynamic culture. It's not a melting pot, right? I don't like the melting pot analogy. It's all melting into one gooey thing. No, it's salad, you can still enjoy the tomatoes, but also enjoy the lettuce. It's different, but it's all working together as a salad. So thinking of it a little bit differently and creatively, and doing what works well for your organization and what people want. It's about what the employees want, right?
Amara, I really want to share something with you all, because I think it can be implemented in any industry. We have something at Snap called Council. Council is the process. We can do it virtually or we can do it physically. We sit in a room all together. That's where maybe HR can help. We have what we call a council facilitator. And everyone is being asked one question, and we just pass around the question, but we don't interact with one another, which really helps extroverts, introverts get the same amount of space. And we have councils for identifiers. So we'll have LGBTQ plus only council, safe space. And then we have councils that where we open it to all. And I think the most interesting notion that we came up with was fishbowl council. Fishbowl's council is when allies in the room can only listen and identifiers speak about their experiences. And when you talk about a company that's 50 people, it's very easy to implement this, and it's up to the leadership to make sure everybody comes. But it really helps to understand the issues that are women issues, like black related issues, like in the UK, like queer issues, because you are speaking one by one. There's no exchange, and at the end, the very last round is what came out of this that you remember, or what are you going to reflect on tonight? And I think that's a very non-aggressive format, easy to create a safe space for the people that identify, and you can really tweak it in function of like what your organization's size or values are like. So I wanted to share this. I think it's very easily applicable.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Paul. All right, we have our final question. I know we can get to all of the audience questions, but we would love to know what is your final insight or call to action you'd like to leave folks with today, whether they're ERG leaders, HR leaders, people leaders. This can be literally anything. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but Elisa, I'll pass to you first. And if you want to popcorn to someone after you're done with your response, that would be great.
Great, yeah. So, I think the big thing to take away from this panel, just looking at all of our experiences, is if this is something that is not currently implemented in your workplace, and it is something that you want to do, you can hear everybody's story, how this started with, in some cases, a grassroots effort. So I think the big thing is, if there is no representation, or it feels like there is no space in the place where you're at, sometimes it just takes the initiative to start, right? And you don't need to be the professional DEI person hired specifically with that title in mind in order to start making a change inside of the organization in which you're at. You'll find allyship, you'll learn a lot about yourself and leadership and the folks that you work with, and maybe transform the culture of some companies. And so it can be a very rewarding space and journey for you. So I would say just start. If it's not there and you're not sure what to do, just take that first step. And I'll popcorn to Alana.
Okay, thanks. I was going to say kind of something similar. I had a manager one time, and he would say often, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so it can be very intimidating and overwhelming to think, especially if you're at a really big company, or a company that's in a conservative area, or is just a conservative company in general, like, is anything I do really going to help change the culture of this company? But really, if you just take one step at a time and you just start moving in the direction that you want the company to go, like Elisa said, you make connections and you get people on board, and you leverage the allies. That's really important as well, and that's a big thing that we're trying to do here at International Paper. And yeah, it's going to be a long road, but we're heading in the right direction, and I'm really excited about it and really proud to be a part of it. And happy to be here on this call. So thanks for including me. Okay, Paul, how about you next?
Good. I think first action is set up a mission statement. Like, you need to know what you're doing. I think we have 3, but you can start with 1. Can be making it a safe space, could be educating allies, could be empowering people on the platform. And second is you have to think about it as a sales pitch. Like, I'm in a sales organization. I sell this to people. So you need to sell it to your leadership, and you need to come up with very clear KPIs so that they can see what your actions are going to bring to the business. Unfortunately, it is always a business. So productivity levels, KPIs to show that you're meeting your expectations so that you can ask for more. And the last one is asking for money, asking for stocks, asking for to be included in all of the conversations with HR that relate to for me, it's like queer individuals always asking for more. When you ask, you have to be legitimate, but the mission statement and the KPIs are going to help you get there. So mission statement, KPIs, and asking. And I'll popcorn it to Carol.
Thank you, Paul. So I think the one thing that I want to center, and coming from, it seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong, everyone, I'm coming from government or more nonprofit sector. And so one of the things that's really interesting is government it's very hierarchical, it's very structured, right? It could be a behemoth all on its own. And so inside of government and inside of really working toward having an inclusive culture, which can be difficult, right? I think the one thing to really center is the point, right? Yeah, there's a lot of wanting to, the ERGs at the health department all are a part of HR and EEO's commitment to this work. And it can be easy, I think, to just kind of center on policy, right? Human rights policy and all those types of things, which are very, very reflective in government. But what's really important is to really remember that, we can't do our work in our communities as public servants, without doing our work internally first with ourselves. We as employees at the agency are the community as well. And so making sure that we foster that sense of community and center and ground ourselves in a sense of community is really the first step to ensuring success, right? It's kind of one of those if you build it, and I mean community, they will come type of conversations. We've been able to just enroll a lot of agencies leadership from the commissioner on down and other agencies to create ERGs as well, because we've taken so many powerful stances on what community looks like inside of our agency. So I really want to center that is building a vision, a mission, charters, all of the rest of it that centers community. And I just want to say thank you again for having me, and I'll pass it off to Amara, last but certainly not least.
Thank you so much. You're so kind, Carol. No, 2 call to actions. The first one is just echoing Alana and Eliza, right? You can't figure out how to take step 100 if you don't take step 1. So this is for the future ERG leaders. Just do it, create the space, and then other people will help you figure out how to fill it. You'll be so surprised what comes out of people once you help create that space. And the second call to action is more for the leaders. Maybe you're someone that has an ERG proposal on your desk, something like that. You will always get the most out of happy employees who feel like they belong in spaces that are inclusive, where your organization is welcoming to everyone. If people are able to bring their truest and most authentic selves to work, they will do their best work. And it's the positive energy that will, reflect and ricochet. You will attract more positivity, better people into the company. And it's honestly a domino effect that cannot really be stopped. At the end of the day, it is business. It is about the bottom line, and your bottom line will only get better if your major input does, which is, the labor, right? So thank you so much, Christina, and thank you to everyone. I've learned a lot, and everyone at HR and Rainbow Council is going to get a lot of thoughts from me tomorrow. I started jotting down my notes.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our incredible panelists, our audience members. I know we went a couple minutes over. As I mentioned, the recording will be on our website. Feel free to share with your coworkers, team, family, and friends. And if you have any questions about AllVoices, please let me know. But have a great rest of your day, everyone. Happy Pride if you are in the United States. And thank you for creating such a special space when it feels like so many things are on fire. Okay, talk to you later. Bye.